This is empowering your apps with AWS. It's an introduction to Appercept AWS SDK for Delphi. I'm Richard Hatherhall from Appercept. I am the author of the Appercept AWS SDK for Delphi. You may be aware of my open source project available on GitHub, Delphi WebMox. WebMox enables testing of HTTP client interactions with dUnitX. I'm also the author of Chat Health, a messaging platform that powers messaging services offered by the National Health Service in the UK. Let's quickly go over what we'll talk about in this session. First, we'll have a quick overview of what AWS is. Then we'll talk about what you'll need to make use of AWS. We'll look at a series of demos that I hope will inspire you to power up your applications with the services offered. We'll take a look at how you use it in its simplest forms. Then we'll have a walkthrough of the services currently supported by the Appercept AWS SDK. Then we'll have an overview of the general features that the SDK provides and see how it supports you in working with AWS. And last, we'll check out where you can get access to the AWS SDK. So, what is AWS? It's Amazon Web Services. It launched its first cloud service in 2004. It is the leading cloud platform. So that's all great, but what can I do with it? So you can deploy virtual infrastructure in the cloud as if it were your own. You can build from the network up, deploying virtual machines and connecting services to support your applications. You can also host an application. What I mean by that is you don't need to worry about the details of the network and other infrastructure. You can take an application you have developed and use a service to host that application, which takes care of all the details for you. What we're here to talk about, though, is how to empower your applications with the many powerful services offered by AWS. These services often encapsulate features too difficult for small developers to implement themselves. They offer opportunity to really boost your own application's functionality. So, what do I need? Well, you're going to need Delphi, of course, because it's an AWS SDK for Delphi, and that's what we're talking about. You're also going to need an Amazon Web Services account, and then you're going to need an SDK, and that's where Appercept comes in. So let's jump straight in and take a look at some demos. First, we'll take a look at Amazon Cognito. So Amazon Cognito is actually a collection of services for identity provision. So you've got user pools, which are an identity provider. That allows you to have a managed list of or directory of users for your applications. And there's identity pools, which are ways to take an identity from a signed-in user and assign credentials by federating those users' identities into the Amazon Web Services platform. Let's jump straight in and have a look at that. Okay, so jumping straight into the Cognito demo, if I run this, we'll see this form come up with a message saying guest user access. So this is actually loading from a document on Amazon S3, and I've been granted access to this object by Cognito's federated credentials. I'll quickly jump us into the Amazon Cognito console here and show you. So there's two sides to this. First of all, there's the user pool, and you can come in here and you can create a user pool, and you just run through a wizard and answer some questions, and you've got a new identity user pool, and the user pool is your directory of users. So if I look here in this user pool, I can see there are users that I've set up here. You can define groups, you can change the sign-in experience and sign-up experience for like self-service and things like that. You can change messages that go out to people at the appropriate times, and you can configure application integration, and we'll see more of this later. And there's advanced security and more advanced user pool properties as well. So this is how you configure your sign-in experience. And then there's the identity pool side. And the identity pool side, so if we look at this identity pool to go along with that, this is configured. If we go to user access, you can see I've configured this authenticated access here, which has a role that is granted to authenticated users. But I've also configured down the bottom here a guest user access, and this has a different role that is associated with it. So if people aren't signed in who are talking to this identity pool, they'll get permissions based on whatever is in this role. So this is what's happening. If we switch back now to our demo app here, we've fetched this document out of S3 based on the permissions granted to us from that identity pool. So if we sign in now and we use one of the users that was in the user pool associated with the identity pool, we can, if I remember the password correctly, there we go. So it's now issued me a different set of credentials, which has given me access to different resources. And in this case, I'm loading another document which has authenticated user access. If I want to, in fact, I'll show you this. So this is something to bear in mind if you are going to use this, because the user interface. So if I sign out again, that signs us out, returns us back to where we were. If I sign in, this user interface looks pretty blank and basic. This can all be customized with CSS, and you can add a logo into this grey panel here. So it doesn't have to look quite as dull as this, but because this is a web interface, if you configure your user pool with multi-factor authentication, you don't need to create any user interface to deal with that, or any logic in your application to deal with that. It all gets taken care of here, and I should point out that this is a T web browser effectively here that's embedded within this component. We have a component I'll show you in a second which actually encapsulates that, so it's not just a T web browser, because there's a bit more going on than that. But if I sign us back in, the reason I mention it's a web browser is because if I then so we're now authenticated, but if I close this and I rerun this application, and we've got guest user access apparently, but if I hit sign in now, we have authenticated user access, and I wasn't challenged for a username and password, and that's because the web session that Cognito has is still active, is still valid. So it just let me sign back in immediately without any more challenges, because it's under the that is web technology. So it's worth bearing in mind that you might, in some scenarios, you might want to have something to deal with that. Eventually, this web session will expire, and by default, a Cognito web session, I believe, is 1 hour long. So it's not indefinite. Let's sign back out here, and if I show you the authentication form, so on it there is this panel here which is a tCognito hosted UI, and it's got a series of options that you need to specify. It's got a domain, it's got a client ID, and it's got a client secret, and it's got a redirect URI. So they're the core things you need to set. There are some more options that you might need to set depending on your use case, but they're the key ones. And if we just have a look back in the if we go back to the user pool and we go back to the app integration section, you'll see that actually all these values are here. So Cognito domain, so that value there, you just copy that and you paste that onto the domain property. And if you go into the app client list, let's go into this one here, you have the client ID here, and you have a client secret here. Now, the client might not be a confidential client, it might be a public client, in which case you won't have a client secret. That's fine, you don't need to paste that in. And the other thing to note is you have there's a configured hosted UI callback URL. So this is important for the component. So you need to define a callback URL, typically as a custom URL scheme like this, myapp://demo, and you would take that value and you paste that into the redirect URI, and that's what the Cognito hosted UI component will be listening for to receive its authentication details. So that is Cognito. Very simple to set up and use in your Delphi application. There are a lot of advanced areas of the configuration on the Amazon side, but it's really trivial to integrate that with your Delphi apps. Next, we're going to take a look at Amazon Polly. Amazon Polly is Amazon's text-to-speech service. It allows you to provide it some text, and it will return you a file, an audio file that will play that text back. Okay, so let's take a look at this PollySpeak demo. This demonstrates AWS Polly, Amazon's text-to-speech engine. If I quickly run this, you'll see here. First thing we do is we ask it to load a list of the voices that we have access to, and you'll see there's a big long list here. Voices with different characteristics, male, female, in lots of different languages. I'm going to select Matthew here, which is a US English male voice, and I'm going to just paste in some text here, and let's hear what it says.
Hello Dev Days of Summer 2024.
Okay, that was exactly as you'd expect. It's slightly robotic, but we can improve that. If you're prepared to spend a few fractions of pennies more, we can enable neural, and this enables the same voice. Not every voice supports neural, and if you select a voice in the list that doesn't, this option won't be here, or it'll be grayed out. But this voice does. So if we select neural, we can now hit speak again.
Hello Dev Days of Summer 2024.
And hopefully you heard that it was a bit more rounded out, a bit more natural, less robotic. If you need to control how it says the text with a bit more precision, then there's this option here, enable markup SSML. and the SSML is a speech markup language. And let's have a look. If I paste in something here, let's see this. This demonstrates what we're talking about. So you notice you have to put in these speak tags and things. But let's listen to this.
A bear walks into a bar and says, "I'll have a gin and tonic." The bartender looks at him and asks, "Why the big pause?" The bear replies, "I was born with them."
So I didn't necessarily give it the greatest joke, but it does demonstrate what I wanted to show here, which is if you need to insert things like pauses, you can do that with SSML. So that's the AWS Poly service running through our PolySpeak demo. This is a very simple demo. If we have a quick look in the speak action, you'll see what we do here is we have a request and a response, and we create a request, and we set a series of options on that request, and then we ask the Poly client to synthesize speech and return the response for us. And we say if the response is successful, we save the content of that to a file, and we ask then the media player here to load that file and play it. It's as simple as that. Next, we'll take a look at Amazon Textract. Amazon Textract is a service for extracting text out of images or documents. So you can provide it a photo, and if it can detect text in that, it will tell you what that text is and whereabouts in the image it is. Okay, this is the AWS Textract demo. Textract is for extracting text from image documents. If I quickly run this demo and show you how it works, we're going to open an image document. This is an image, a photo I took while I was in Schiphol Airport while traveling to Amsterdam for the Delphi Summit. And shout out to Marco and everyone else at GDK. Thank you. It was a great summit. If you didn't manage to make it there, I believe they are planning another for next year, so I hope to see you there. So anyway, if we hit detect document text here, we get a list of content it's managed to detect. So if we go to this top element here, you can see I use the information it returned to outline the information that it detected, and in this case on this item it's the page. It's detected a page of text here, and if I go down to the next one, taxi, it's hard to see, but that's actually detected that little taxi on the top of that icon. And then if I click taxi information, it's detected this line of text, taxi information, and so on throughout the document. So if I show you how that's done, it's super simple from an AWS point of view. Again, we use a Textract client and request and response. So we create a request, and we populate the document with a Textract document from file, and we give it the input document file name, and then we ask the client, the Textract client, to detect document text with that request, and we retrieve the response. And if the response is successful, we just set, we have a property on this form called current blocks, and we set the blocks from the response onto that. And if if I just go down here, you'll see that we have some code here. The more complex part of this code is actually using the response information to draw the polygons around the elements in the document. The AWS part of this is super simple. Okay, let's move on to Amazon Translate. Amazon Translate can take text from one language and translate it into another of Amazon supported languages. Let's take a look. Okay, so this is AWS Translate. So the Translate service does exactly as you would expect. We've all seen things like Google Translate. If you give it some text, and I've set the source language to auto, so hopefully it will detect that is French, and we get the English translation. Really simple. The languages here, we populate these lists from a request because the languages could potentially change from time to time as Amazon support more languages. So we query the service to say what languages do you support, and so we populate both of these lists. On the source though, we give this option of auto, which isn't obviously returned in the response, but it's a flag that you can set on the request when you do a translation. If you don't know what language you're coming from, if you specify auto, it will detect, and the response to that will then tell you what language it detected, which is how we set here in this display label the language code FR. Okay, now we'll move on to Amazon Simple Storage Service, or S3. This is probably Amazon's most popular, most famous of its services. Let's take a look. Okay, so here on the S3 Explorer demo, it demos a number of features of the Amazon Simple Storage Service S3. If I quickly run this demo, let's have a look here. So it gives you an Explorer-like interface, and you can select from your available buckets. So I'm just going to choose this demo bucket here, and if I expand the paths here, we can see we've got a documents folder, an image folder, and an uploads folder. If I want to upload a new document here, so I'm going to, or an object in S3 terms, I'm going to select a file here. This video is just shy of 200 megabytes, and if I hit open, you'll see straight away that an upload progress happens, and if I just expand this up, you'll see it's reporting back status of not just one upload, it's doing multiple parts because the file exceeds the parameters that allow it to do a multi-part upload. And doing a multi-part upload increases your efficiency. So when you're operating in the cloud and you've got network connections to be concerned with, there are times that network connections are faulty. So something somewhere goes wrong, and a request fails. But if you're uploading gigabytes of files, then if one of those parts fails, or if you're doing it as one big block, say you're uploading 100 gigabytes, then it would be very inefficient. You have to start again from the beginning. So as a multi-part, if one of these parts fails and you have an automatic retry policy enabled, then it will automatically retry the part individually. And as long as eventually that part succeeds, the whole upload succeeds. So you won't unnecessarily re-upload potentially many gigabytes of data that you don't need to. So if we have a quick look at this under the hood, there's quite a lot going on in the S3 Explorer demo. So I would say it's worth going and checking this demo out and looking at how to work with S3. S3 is one of Amazon's largest, oldest, and potentially most complex services to interact with. We help you out a great deal with utilities to simplify some of the tasks, like multi-part, and I'll show you how we do that now. So if I open the upload form and the form.file upload, and we go and look at the code in this. So this is the upload file function or procedure, and I'll just quickly point out that we run this I'll point out first that we're using a TS3 object. So we're not interacting with the client directly. We're not asking it directly to put an object somewhere. We are using TS3 object because it's one of our model objects that has some business logic embedded in it. It helps you access most of the functions that you would want relating to an object. So it represents, when you create an object, it represents an object in a bucket. So you give it the bucket that it's stored in, and you give it the key, which is effectively the path to the file or object, as I say in S3 terms, and you optionally give it a configured client. You don't have to give it a client. If you don't give it a client, it will construct one for you. But in this case, we hand it a client because we have one already configured for this application. So it's more efficient for us to use that client here. And then we use ttask to run the upload in a background thread, because a long-running function is going to block the main UI thread. So we put it in the background, and within the background thread, we ask the object to upload a file, and we give it the path of the file on disk that we want to upload, and we have a parameter here which is use temp files. And using temp files, if the file needs to be broken up into multi parts, because by default we don't break up every file. We only break them up based on some logic, which is by default it is files less than 100 meg don't need to be broken up. Once you're over 100 meg, they will be broken up into small chunks, and you can configure that in the SDK. There are ways to configure that, but one of the things you need to consider is whether you want to use temp files or not. If you're running on a platform that is constrained by memory or disk I/O, if you use temp files, it will break up the file into temporary files that will then be uploaded, and it will automatically clean those temporary files up for you at the end. Or if you don't want to use disk storage, and you have enough memory, obviously you wouldn't necessarily recommend it for super large files, but if you've got enough memory for the types of uploads you're going to be doing, you can set the use temp files to false, and it will just do it all in memory for you, saving you that disk bandwidth. And then we have a callback here, and the callback returns to us the status of each part as it's happening. The upload file will automatically asynchronously break up the list of parts, and it will, depending on the resources, how many CPUs and so on you have, or how many cores on your CPU you have, it will only upload based on what resources you have available. But those parts are going to report back their status asynchronously, which is why we then have to, in this, we queue back, because we're going to update the user interface here. We use tthread to queue back the update to the user interface, which is where we have these functions here to upload to update the part progress. And I won't show you the details of that because it's just it's regular Delphi user interface code. So basically, by the end of this upload file procedure, it will have uploaded the file. If everything worked, it will have uploaded the file, and it will have automatically cleaned up the any temporary files and things like that that it needed to do as a part of that process. Like I say, there are multiple areas in the SDK where we provide these convenience routines, and while there's also business logic here that you might maybe think, oh well, I don't really want to actually break up. Maybe I'm happy to not break up files up to, I don't know, 250 meg, 500 meg or something. We have super fast connections these days. You think maybe that's okay. There are ways to configure all of these parameters. I won't go into those details right here, but you can set your own parameters for these things. Okay, and now let's put it all together. We'll take a look at a demo called Read What You See. Okay, so we've seen the services demoed individually, but let's now take a look at Read What You See, which is a demo which shows putting together multiple services to make some functionality that is greater than the sum of the parts. So if we run this demo, and I'm going to open a file, and I'm going to open one of the demo images from that I used for Textract, but I'm going to open, instead of in English, I'm going to open the same display information in a different language. So I don't understand this language, of course. So this app I've made allows me to click on parts of the image, and it's going to translate and read it to me. So if I click here,
taxi information.
So it's used Textract to detect all of the image text, and when I click on the image,
trip to Amsterdam city centre.
It says what was the image, what was the text at the coordinates where I clicked the image, and it takes that and it uploads it to translate, and it translates to the whichever language I've selected here, and then once it gets a response from translate, it sends that content, the translated text, up to AWS Poly, which will generate text to speech, which returns me an MP3 file, which I then play out. So I can click away to my heart's content, and I can understand what this sign is telling me here.
Trip takes,
nice.
25 minutes. Place 4. 1 to 7 people with luggage.
Excellent, that's all I need to know. So that was Read What You See. So go and check out the code from the samples repository. To make this easier for you, I broke all of this code up into 3 data modules. So the main form calls each function in turn, at the appropriate moment. And you've got 3 data modules. You've got the first thing is the text extraction data module, and this, if you look at the code here, it has all of the functions used by the app for extracting text and finding out, selecting text at a given point. And then, so not text to speech. Let's have a look at the translate next. So on the translate, we have a set of functions that are needed for actually performing the translation. And on the text to speech, we have some functions here, some properties and functions to convert text to speech. So you can go and look in the demo repository and check out how all of this is working. But yeah, there you go. That's read what you see. Okay, so we've seen these demos and you've seen some of the code in these demos. But let's just take a quick breakdown of how do I actually use it. So we have a listing of code here called list S3 buckets. It's a console application, and it replicates the functionality of one of AWS's command line utilities. So if you had the AWS command line utilities installed, if you typed AWS S3 LS, it would list out the buckets that your account has access to. And we replicate that here. So on line 9, you will see the first thing we do is we add a service unit to the users clause. So this is the same for all of the services. It's the same pattern. So it's AWS dot the service name, in this case S3, but it could be AWS dot poly for the poly text to speech engine. And then down on line 14, we are defining a variable for an interface to the S3 client. So this is IS3 client in this case. If it was poly, it would be the same naming convention. It would be iPoly client. Then down on line 19, we're assigning that variable an instance of the TS3 client. So that's the actual class that's going to talk to S3 for us. In this case, we're not providing anything, any more details to it, so it's configured entirely as default. And then on line 22, we are asking the S3 client to list the buckets, and we're assigning the result of that to a response variable. On line 25, we just iterate over the bucket names that were returned in that response, and we are outputting them to the console. And it's worth mentioning as well, we have scoped exceptions. So down on line 14, you see that we catch specifically the ES3 exception, which is catching all S3 related exceptions within the application. We're not doing anything particularly special with it here. It's just here to demonstrate that you can do that. And the output of this is effectively identical to the output that you would see from AWS's own command line utility. So now you've seen how to use it, let's have a look at the supported services. So in the application integration category, we have Amazon Simple Notification Service. SNS, as it's known for short, is a really simple service that allows you to have one interface for talking, for delivering notifications to your applications wherever they may be, and that can include the mobile push notification services that you typically use on iOS and Android. So that's Apple Push Notification Service, that's Firebase Cloud Messaging, and other push notification services, as well as delivering push notifications to other mechanisms such as HTTP endpoints and so on. So we offer support for that. The other service in this category is the Simple Queue service. So SQS allows you to push payloads into a queue. So if you want to have a background job do something in the cloud that you're going to have a program somewhere else, if you actually consume and do the work for you, you can use SQS to just feed the job data into a queue and then have it consumed elsewhere. Then if we have a look at the business applications category, we support the Simple Email Service, SES. This actually allows you to send and receive messages, but typically as application developers, we're normally mostly interested in the ability to send emails. So that might be marketing emails, or it might be transactional emails like like welcome messages to your new application account, things like that. In the cryptography and PKI category, we support the AWS Key Management Service. On its own is not that interesting, but combined with other services that have cryptographic features, it's a useful service to have access to. Then in machine learning category, we have a series of services. We have the Poly text-to-speech service, which we've already seen in action. We have the Textract service, which again you've seen extract text from image documents. We have Transcribe, which is a service for transcribing audio tracks into text. And we have Amazon Translate, which is their translation service. Then under security, identity and compliance, we have Amazon Cognito. You've seen two of those services within Cognito, user pools and identity pools. There is actually a third service as well, which is Cognito Sync, which is for taking small data sets associated with a user identity. So you can then, say, for example, synchronize user preferences across devices. We also have the AWS Secrets Manager. So and most applications these days at some point need to store some secrets, whether that's passwords or other sensitive information. So you can use the Secrets Manager to securely store those bits of information. You can also use the AWS Security Token service, which most of the time isn't directly interacted with. It's used all of the time in the AWS SDK. It provides facilities such as the ability to assume roles, allowing your user to behave as a different user, which isn't necessarily needed to be directly interacted with, but it can do that for you in a number of scenarios. You can, of course, choose to interact directly if you have a more advanced use case. And then we've got the storage category. We support the Amazon Simple Storage service, which allows you to store huge amounts of data on a very resilient, reliable platform, globally distributed as well. So let's have a look at the features that the SDK provides. First of all, I should mention it's built on top of the system.net.http client, which is Delphi's core built-in HTTP client. And that's important because that means it's compatible with all Delphi supported target platforms. So whether you're on Windows, Linux, Mac, iOS, Android, the SDK can work for you there. We provide direct mappings of all features for implemented services. So all of the services that we have implemented are, when we deliver them, they are feature complete. Obviously, AWS is a moving target. They add new features from time to time. Things change. We try and keep up with that, but it's a very large platform. So if you ever notice there's a discrepancy when something missing, or ping us an email and we will try and get that updated. But we do try and stay on top of that. So we honor the AWS configuration. So Amazon Web Services own tools. So whether it's a command line tool or whether it's their own SDKs, they have a standard way to configure those tools, and it's consistent across all of their tools. So we work in the same way. We load that same configuration data, whether it's from shared files in the common AWS locations, whether that's through environment variables. So if you've got a task that's running on an EC2 instance or a Docker task running on ECS, you will often find applications being configured through environment variables. We support that. We also support the platform services that Amazon supports. So if you're deployed on EC2, there are platform services that provide credential information to your application at runtime, which means you don't have to bake in credentials into your actual application. You can dynamically load them in. We have automatic credential resolution, just as I mentioned. We look in all of the typical places for your credentials and load them as appropriate. We automatically refresh those credentials as well, because credentials are not typically long life on AWS. They normally are short life with an ability to refresh, as long as the conditions are met for refreshing. We have scoped exceptions, which means if you are working with a handful of services, but you want to respond to different service errors in different ways, like you need to handle, say, errors that came from S3 in one way, but errors that came from, say, Translate in a different way, then we provide scoped exceptions so you can catch those specific categories, or down to the specific error that you're looking for. We do have automatic retries based on policy. So this is a thing that is typical, or it is common of Amazon's own SDKs. There are configuration settings that define how your retries should be performed, and on retriable errors we will honor that same configuration within the SDK. We have convenient utility classes that help you to do things like perform complex or asynchronous actions, things that are sometimes a little bit too much work for like a one-line interaction. we've made utilities to help. And you've already seen that in the S3 Explorer demo earlier, which made use of the S3 model objects, which use under the hood. They use utilities like the S3 uploader class, which takes care of multi-part uploading. So that's doing an upload with lots of requests under the hood. So it takes care of all of those details for you. Also, there are times where you need to build complex data structures, like in Amazon's identity and access management. Permissions are granted to users and roles and groups and so on through a JSON structure, an IAM policy document, and we provide utility classes to help you build that up in Pascal without having to directly interact with the JSON. We have IDE integrated AWS configuration manager. So under the tools options, under the third party section, there is an Appercept AWS SDK, and that will give you access to your AWS configuration on your machine, which allows you to define profiles and be able to switch between profiles within the IDE. So you can also then debug your application with different profiles. So if you wanted to test your application with a profile that doesn't have access to certain services or has only limited access in a particular area, then you can define different profiles to help you conveniently switch. We also have IDE integrated help. So anywhere you see one of the symbols from the SDK, you can highlight it and hit F1 and get help on that particular feature. We also provide components for FMX and VCL. You would have seen earlier the Cognito hosted UI components. We've got more in the pipeline for this. So you've seen what we offer now, and you may be interested in getting the SDK. And those of you with an active Embarcadero, Delphi or RAD Studio Enterprise or Architect subscription may be pleased to find that you can already get it through Get It. So go check out the Get It package manager, and you should see the Appercept AWS SDK there available for you. There are also standard and professional editions coming soon for those who don't have that subscription. It's very nearly ready for release. Stay tuned for news, and if you want to register your interest, you can pop over to our website, www.appercept.com, go and register your interest, and when we make these new editions available, we will send an email out to you. So that was empowering your apps with AWS. There are some details here if you want to get in touch with us, and there is a GitHub link there that gives you access to all of the samples that you've seen today in this talk, and some more as well. So go and check those out, have a play around. I hope you enjoy working with the SDK. Thank you.
You can get it via Get It. That's today's phrase, isn't it? I love it. And joining us live in the studio is Richard. Hello, Richard.
Hello.
See, we got you on your multi-cam view in the background. Everybody would have seen you like zooming around and stuff like that. There's a bit of an echo, actually. I think if you've got the YouTube thing playing, you might have to pause it.
I don't have the... I know. How about now? Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. I can't hear it. Oh, no, actually, I still just very briefly can
hear
it.
Oh. Hold on.
We're just zapping the echo, everybody.
Trying to tweak the controls. How about now? Is that better?
Actually, I can still hear a little bit.
Oh,
it's my voice that I can hear, which is not good.
Hold on. Sorry.
Richard, unfortunately, uses that terrible hardware from Apple, which is awful quality. And, that's what happens with these things. Yeah. It's still, I can still hear it just playing around.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. It's not Apple's awful hardware in this case. It's Apple's awful software, because I'm signed in through Safari and I've just gone into the settings and of this Restream we're using, and it says noise suppression isn't available through.
There you go. You see, so that's what
if I'd known to note to other speakers, don't use Safari.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's a rule anyway. No, I mean, I'm an Apple fan, so there's a little bit of an echo, but I think I should be clear enough. It's going to be fine. So lots of people commenting on your stuff. I'm going to put the QR code up again so that they can go to it. As you joked around, but meaningfully, your stuff is available via Get It. So if they go into the IDE, if they've got a paid version and go to Get It, then they'll be able to get.
You're not the only British poet on this channel.
I know, right? Very impressed. Yeah. I've got some questions here which came up. So rather than me talk, if I pull those questions up, because there are a few relevant ones. So Patrick Premontan, I said I wasn't going to talk, but I'm going to anyway. Do you deliver the source code with your SDK? You did say the answer to this, but I'll let you reiterate it.
So the Embarcadero edition that comes through Get It, that has source code with it. When it's installed, it's pre-compiled for all platforms, so it should install nice and quickly. But the source code is accompanying it. I've got 2 editions that are about to be released any day now. I've been saying that for a couple of weeks, but like, people keep coming and asking me for videos and things. So
stop being good, and we won't ask you anymore.
So I've got a standard edition and a pro edition that is coming out very soon. The standard edition will be binary only, but it will be priced much cheaper, and the professional edition will have source code with it, and priced appropriately. So
and Daniel Fernandez, I'm going to get his name wrong because he's got. I'm guessing Dan. I'm pretty certain you're Brazilian, if I remember correctly, which is why you have several names, because it seemed to be the Brazilian way of doing things. Brits barely have one name. But it's Daniel Fernando Gonzalez Pena. I think I'm saying that properly. And he said this, which is not really a question, although he asked a lot of questions, which is he's saying there's lots of other scenarios we can explore the SDK in. And he said, thank you for your good disposition, which is, I know to mean, thank you for your good demonstration. And, good job, because I've seen you a few times. Obviously, we know each other quite well, and every time I've seen you present, afterwards there's a bunch of people go, "Oh, that was really good," and "Oh, I loved your SDK," and stuff like that. And don't forget what we said. We produced an app to do. Do you remember? Not a hot dog. Yeah, not exactly. Yeah. I was saying now, someone will copy us and they'll beat us to it. But
we'll do not a something. We'll find something.
What a cucumber? Yes, that's the one. Yeah. But I think the thing is that, as we kind of mentioned during the chat, actually these services, joking apart, are incredible. The one, for example, that you can do the text extract, which you show the demo of there so well, and then the Poly voice, which I actually like. I really like Amazon Poly. I think choosing the right voice is kind of key to getting a natural sound. But And you have to tweak some of the words if you got some specific weird name like Barker, which it chokes on for some reason. But I can definitely see, the potential for an app there where you take the text, extract it from an image, put it through Amazon Poly or whatever, and through the conversion, the translation tool that then translates it to a different language and then gets it to speak that foreign language is quite an incredible thing that actually would be possible with Brad Studio. And your AWS SDK.
I mean, people in other languages are, where they've got access to Amazon's own tools, are doing incredible things with these cloud services. And this is really what I wanted to bring to Delphi. When it might not have been a story outside of the UK, I don't know, but when I think the last royal wedding, whenever it was, had an incredible amount of celebrities show up to it, and I know AWS was contracted to I think to the BBC and probably to other people to use their services to do near real-time recognition of people, so they could provide data to the presenters talking about all the people attending the wedding and things. So these services, whenever you combine them up with streams of data and with when you're taking multiple services and rearranging how they work together, they can create so many different things.
Yeah, and as Patrick said, who is always super active on the chat, this is how he became the Delphi superstar that he is. But we've both met Patrick and know him quite well. But as he said, AI can do many great things without stealing things from creators. Stealing is a harsh word, I think, to use. I think it's learning from people's content. But yeah, I can see how, if it's learning from your source code and regurgitates your source code as kind of.
Without getting into a debate about the legalities of that, but obviously source code being copyright and having permissions granted
or music
or not, then it could be that even just the fact that it is learning from your code could be classed as theft. But so in that respect, yes. But I think what he's trying to say here is there are aspects of AI where it's improving our our current situation, not necessarily just taking or whatever you would.
Yeah, the real-time recognition of celebrities could prove to be a problem for the celebrity if they're trying to keep on incognito. If they're walking through an airport and they've got, these big black glasses on and they've got, you've seen them all walking around like this trying to go, I'm not here. And then some AI goes, oh, there's Richard Gere. It's I know how that would be. I'm sure
that was quite a reach. Richard Gere, what?
Hey, don't knock Richard Gere. He's a guy. But you know what I mean. But whoever it is, if AI is contributing towards the stalking of someone, even if it wasn't someone famous, if it was an ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend or even a boss that you want to find out what he does on his weekends off or her weekends off, then you can see how there would be negative uses for it. But at the same time, bringing two people together, I use Microsoft Translate all the time. And I joked whilst we were chatting off screen about being British, therefore we don't need to learn another language. I speak loudly at someone. But actually, the Microsoft Translate does a very good job of, if I go to Holland, like Amsterdam, like we both did, and I can speak English and it regurgitates it into Dutch or whatever language, is very, very useful. My dog's barking now, so. But I think it's great. Your libraries are great. Your SDK is a work of art. What people don't realize, anybody that's watching this, is how much effort you put into crafting those SDKs to be as good as they can be, not just like making them work and work okay, but actually, I'm one of these people that does this now. Oh God, but not just that, but also the fact that you optimize them to do things that I know other SDKs don't do. You know, you've talked about the restarts, you know, where something is not working, so you retry and you make sure that's done in the most optimal way. And I think that's something that is not appreciated by people who are looking at a component vendor, which I guess you are, or an SDK vendor or whatever. They don't understand the craftsmanship that goes on behind the scenes for that. And I do, because I know, you know, the conversations we've had. You know, we have regular meetings about your product as well, obviously with product development in Embarcadero. But, you know, it's not just that you make AWS easy to use, you make it reliable to use as well. I mean, as far as anything can be reliable, you know.
I was going to say, I mean, AWS do most of that themselves, but I want to make sure that our Delphi components are not the weak part of the link, you know. So
that's excellent. I mean, that is absolutely the case. That you know, we don't want it to we don't want it to just work. It's got to work reliably. Otherwise, I mean, as soon as things break, everybody blames your app, even though it's Amazon's fault or something like that. I mean, Amazon doesn't often go down, but when it does, the whole world stops working. So, excellent. Yeah. Okay. Well, look, I really appreciate it. You got a bunch of people watching it, and I know on the replays we'll get several thousand as well. And you're always a really good demonstrator. I know you always worry, I talk too long and the rest of it. Jim's next. I did warn him beforehand. We will overrun a little bit, Jim. So
sorry, Jim.
We don't run too badly. 10 minutes over time, but that's good. But thanks once again, Richard. I think we're doing some more in the future as well. You and I are going to be doing
I think we've got another session on my WebMox, my open source library.
That's right.
In the next day or two. Yeah.
And then you and I are planning something later on in the year as well, I think, as well. So you're very brave or reckless. I don't know which way around it works, but,
okay.
But you'll see us all again.